What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another NFL Deep Dives episode where we're taking a look at my power rankings, talking some Vegas odds, over-unders, Super Bowl chances, and then diving into the depth chart of each team to see where each team's strengths and weaknesses are. So, the Carolina Panthers coming in at 16th, the very middle spot in terms of power rankings. For those of you that have followed my channel starting last August or so, you remember me really putting my foot down saying that Cam Newton was the single most overrated player in the NFL coming off that MVP season where everyone was all over Cam Newton, saying these Panthers were going to be even better. And I went as far as saying the Panthers were not going to win the division, not going to make the playoffs. So you might be surprised now me coming back the other way and having them a spot or maybe a few spots higher than a lot of people are going to have them. I think NFL Network has this team at 20th, but I think it's really important not to overreact or underreact to anything in this league. There's so many random factors. You got to take it back to the median at some point. And I think the Panthers are a great example of that in the last 2 years in both directions. So as far as the Panthers go this year, I think defensively, they're definitely going to take a step forward. They were one of the most feared defenses in 2015, and then last year they had to learn how to play without Josh Norman there, and Luke Kuechly was battling injuries most of the year, barely played. I think by default they're going to be better next year just by having Kuechly back, but you get that secondary with a second year under their belt. I think this defense is going to return, maybe not all the way to where they were in 2015, but somewhere in between last year and 2 years ago, which is definitely a top 10 unit. Offensively, I do have my concerns. Obviously not big on Cam Newton, but that's kind of a mainstream opinion that Cam Newton is not what many people thought he was. But I'm not totally convinced that they're going to be able to return to what they were in 2015. There's a ton of turnover at every position in this offense. At receiver, they lose Corey Brown and Ted Ginn, who were honestly integral parts of this team in 2015. Remember, no Kelvin Benjamin there in 2015. And I remember saying that Corey Brown and Ted Ginn were some of the most underrated players in the NFL. Ted Ginn getting too much flack for the dropped balls, despite the fact that he is constantly wide open and can be schemed open so quickly, and Corey Brown being underrated for essentially being one of the better slot receivers in the NFL. So those guys are out. You got Russell Shepard and Curtis Samuel in to play those positions, and then maybe a little bit of Christian McCaffrey in the slot as well. And then Greg Olsen was the third big piece of that offense, and he seemed to digress last year due to his age. Could he have a bounce-back year? Maybe. That would be a huge step for this offense if Greg Olsen was back to where he was. But just so many moving pieces. This offensive line has its own concerns, but should be better than it was last year. I think in general we're going to see some inconsistencies, and this team might struggle to win close games, struggle to score at will at the end of games when they need to score. Vegas has the Panthers at 8.5 wins. That makes it really tough for me. I think 8 I would go over and settle for that push at 8 wins, but they are basically right where I had the Ravens last episode. I think their range of outcomes is 8 to 10 wins. Unfortunately for the Panthers, they're playing in maybe the best division in football. They have a decent amount of upside themselves, but you also have the Bucs with a tremendous amount of upside, and the Falcons, obviously the NFC champion last year, and then the Saints have the best quarterback in the division, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So this division really is a crapshoot. If I had to absolutely pick, I suppose I would go Falcons, but each of these teams, I guess, have about a 20% chance, plus or minus a few percent points. It's really going to come down to luck, injuries, and when I don't have a good grasp on a division like that, that means I'm staying away. I'm staying away from the 8.5 over-under. I'm staying away from the plus 250 to win the division, even though those are decent odds, I will admit. And the Panthers are actually higher in terms of their chances to win the Super Bowl. Vegas seems to be pretty optimistic about the Panthers in that regard. I think it really just reflects on their upside, saying if they do get back to where they were in 2015, 22-1, not bad to win the Super Bowl, but it's not a bet that I'll be taking. So now let's look at the depth chart and let's mix it up and start on the defensive side of the ball. This edge rush is going to be pretty good. They signed Julius Peppers. They still got Charles Johnson. This is strictly talking from the edge perspective, though their interior guys can get after the passer as well. But it's going to be Charles Johnson and then a rotation of Julius Peppers and Mario Addison. They draft Deshaun Hall out of Texas A&M in the 3rd round, was the guy opposite of Myles Garrett that a lot of people thought wasn't getting the love that he should have. Larry Webster, still kind of developing. He's a freak athlete. And then Zach Moore, Wes Horton. I love the depth really throughout this entire D-line. As we go inside, you got Star Lotulelei and K'Wan Short. Really good 1-2 punch there, maybe the best 1-2. I know I mentioned the Bucks might have that now with McCoy and Baker. Who else do you guys think has the best 1-2 interior D lineman group? Behind those two, you got Eric Kroom, Vernon Butler, Kyle Love, Toby Johnson. So it drops off in terms of the D tackles after, I would say, Kyle Love. But still, 4 deep in that group, really deep throughout. Definitely a strength of this defense. The linebackers, a little more top-heavy than that D-line group, but a very, very good group of linebackers. Maybe the best linebacking core in football. From left to right, you got Shaq Thompson, still growing, but a really good year last year. Luke Kuechly, obviously the best linebacker in football. And then Thomas Davis, who continues to defy his age and played lights out last year. For some reason, his Pro Football Focus grade I noticed was pretty low, but he just makes plays. And even if he gets beat once or twice because of his speed, he makes up for it by drilling someone in the backfield, making a big interception. And the fact that he might be the 3rd most important guy in this group now with Shaq Thompson's development, that's really scary. And then the depth behind those guys, it drops off. You got David Mayo there, he's fine. But then Ben Boulware, undrafted rookie. Jared Norris, Ben Jacobs, Jeremy Cash. So probably a position that's going to have to be addressed with Thomas Davis getting older. Ben Boulware, a fun idea, but really not the athleticism that you are in the end going to want starting at linebacker. And then these corners who really sort of started to come into their own last year. You had Darryl Worley and James Bradbury. Struggled to start, but definitely played better towards the end of the year. And then they signed Captain Munnerlyn. He'll probably go back into the slot. And then the depth behind those guys, not the best. So really kind of a weakness here with the corners. They're fine if they can stay healthy with those top 3, but you would start to get worried if anything happened to one of those 3. You got Travel Dixon, Zach Sanchez, Jeff Richards, Teddy Williams. They do draft Corn Elder in the 5th round, an undersized guy who really was kind of lights out from Miami, more of a nickel corner. And then at safety, they move on from Trey Boston, who was pretty overrated, was really bad at his angles and kind of a liability in coverage as well. He gets released, but they do sign Mike Adams, a veteran who's been playing for the Colts. Should be a good guy to plug in there and not make those mistakes that Trey Boston would make. So an upgrade there, and Kurt Coleman, a solid safety next to him. The depth, no one I'm too excited about. Dean Marlowe, Colin Jones, Desmond Southward. So again, it's going to be a really good defense. I think they're really going to click this year as long as they can stay healthy and be a top 10 unit. Now moving on to the offensive side of the ball, Cam Newton, I think I'm just going to echo everything that I said back in last August. I only had like 20 subscribers when I made that video, so most of you probably don't know what I'm talking about when I'm calling out Cam Newton. For starters, let's get out the way what he's good at. He is a really good pocket passer. When his first couple reads are there, he is great at making quick reads, getting rid of the ball on a dime, and can really complete balls through tough windows. And then he's very nice for designed runs. He's incredibly tough to bring down. Now, my biggest weakness for Cam Newton, that was a glaring weakness in his MVP season, and it was the exact same on tape this year, is everything about him inside the pocket when his first or second read is covered up. Say they run double slants with Greg Olsen going out and Benjamin and Funchess running slants. He's going to make his first 2 reads quickly, but then he's going to do one of 2 things. He will either put too much confidence in his arm and he will try to squeeze it in there and it's going to get picked off, or maybe Kelvin Benjamin, because of his size, is able to reel it in, but that's very unreliable and inconsistent in terms of scoring when you want to. It's kind of a dart throw, if you will. Or he will stand there like a lost dog. He has some of the worst footwork I have ever seen at the quarterback position. and is completely incompetent when it comes to knowing when to use his athleticism to extend plays. He had this rep of being Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson-esque with his mobility, which was so far from the truth. He's more like Carson Palmer back there. And when those first reads are covered up within the fluidity of the offense, it's a huge problem for Cam Newton. Now, he's a really good ball carrier when you design runs for him, but he doesn't use that mobility like he should. And he's slowly getting better at it. But this was still a big problem last year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out his safety that he took against the Vikings. I think it's week 2, going against one of the best pass rushes in football, backed up against his own end zone. His first couple reads get covered up, and he locks up. Everson Griffin beats the left tackle. It's hard to blame the left tackle for that. It was a one-on-one matchup against a really good pass rusher. In my opinion, Cam Newton had room to step up or could have found a way to get rid of the football. Instead, he stands there, he doesn't pick up his feet once, and he takes a sack. I saw a ton of this in 2015, saw it in 2016. I don't think it's going to get fully better going forward. So behind Cam Newton, obviously Cam's not going anywhere. He's still a good quarterback. But Derek Anderson, Joe Webb, Garrett Gilbert, nothing really to talk about there. But now you know who is there. At running back, you got Jonathan Stewart, still the number 1 here despite the Christian McCaffrey pick. Believe Stewart is 30 years old, so I think they're probably hoping to ease McCaffrey in, kind of teach him to run between the tackles, which was not what his strength was in college. I really questioned that Christian McCaffrey pick. I thought he was at best a late first round grade as kind of a luxury pick to an offense that could really use him. Not to say the Panthers couldn't, but thought they had bigger needs. Christian McCaffrey is not Le'Veon Bell. I could not stand seeing those comparisons. Le'Veon Bell is 30 pounds heavier and is way better running between the tackles. Christian McCaffrey does not break tackles. He is, in my opinion, Theo Riddick, except the Panthers used the 8th overall pick on the guy. I don't see him having a ton of success between the tackles unless he can put on weight. But if he puts on weight, how much of that agility does he lose that really makes up his game? So I think he's going to be a weapon. I think he's going to be a very good NFL player. It's just kind of complicated to figure out where he fits into this offense. If he was a slot receiver straight up, I think I'd really like Christian McCaffrey. But again, you don't use an 8th overall pick on a slot receiver, even if he's Jarvis Landry. So it really threw me for a loop there, and then we'll talk about Curtis Samuel in a second. But Fozzie Whitaker, Cameron Artis-Payne, the backups here. Artis-Payne has some upside. Hasn't really gotten that opportunity yet. We'll see if he ever takes over. I doubt it, but I do think they eventually bring in someone else here, seeing as I don't think Christian McCaffrey is ever going to be a 3-down true starting running back. Then these receivers, you got Kelvin Benjamin there. Kind of showed his true colors this year as well, as he is not fast. He is a big receiver, and that's what he does. If he was on any other team, I think Kelvin Benjamin would have been flushed out of that offense, but because of that pairing with Cam Newton's size and arm strength, it is just kind of physically dominating. He's a nice guy for Cam Newton to have because he does like to just say screw it and chuck the ball into tight spaces. And when you have a 6'5" receiver with good hands, it's not a bad flip of the coin. Devin Funchess, another big receiver, probably more upside than Kelvin Benjamin, more of a true receiver with some actual speed and quickness, has slowly been developing, kind of coming from that tight end spot at Michigan, slowly learning the receiver position. And then Russell Shepard comes over from Tampa Bay. I'm really intrigued by him, and I frankly think a lot of this team's success this year is going to hinge on Russell Shepard. He's going to be taking Corey Brown's role, which might not seem like a lot, but Corey Brown has been one of the most reliable slot receivers for this team, a guy that can get open on 3rd down and actually create space. So can Russell Shepard do that? He's a really good athlete, hasn't really had that opportunity in the NFL to prove it. It's going to be an interesting guy to watch this year. And then we got Curtis Samuel here, who I already didn't like the Christian McCaffrey pick as kind of a toy of a player. But Curtis Samuel, I think, is one of the most overrated players in this draft. And I usually like speed, but Curtis Samuel had so many drops in college. He doesn't really make guys miss. He is just a straight line guy. He definitely has some quickness, but he doesn't use it. as well as you would think. If you ask most Ohio State fans, they're going to say Curtis Samuel was a bust. He was a huge recruit that they really tried to get involved but never really met that potential. And if you thought Ted Ginn had bad hands, wait till you see what this Ohio State product has to offer. And then you pair that with Cam Newton's inability to lay off on some passes. He really just chucks it in there on every single throw. I don't think Curtis Samuel is going to catch 30 passes this year. And behind him, you got Charles Johnson, Brenton Burson, Damari Dye. No one you're really too excited about behind there. And then at tight end, you're going to need Greg Olsen to be better than he was last year. Not that he was terrible, but clearly wasn't what he was in 2015. Getting up there in age, he's been Cam Newton's guy, honestly. On third downs, he is just such a rock. They're going to need him to be steady. I would think he's still going to be pretty solid, even if his athleticism has dropped off a bit. Just a really good receiving tight end. One of the best in football for sure. Blocks as well. Then you got Ed Dixon, Chris Manhurt, Scott Simonson. Definitely a position they're going to have to address unless they have plans of moving Devin Funchess to tight end or something, maybe even Kelvin Benjamin. We all probably saw the pictures of Kelvin Benjamin this summer looking like a tight end, not a receiver. Actually looking more like a left guard than a receiver. And then the offensive line, they bring in Matt Khalil to play left tackle. Pretty good player when he's healthy, but that's a big when. He's battled injuries really his whole career other than his first year. And signed a massive deal, one of the most criticized free agent signings. I understood the signing. I think when you get a chance to have that tackle position, you got to take it. I talked last episode about how incredibly thin the tackles throughout the NFL are getting. I don't know if every kid that is 6'6" growing up is slimming down and choosing to play basketball or what's going on here, but offensive tackle has never been this poor as long as I've been a football fan. The interior of this offensive line is very solid. Andrew Norwell, Ryan Khalil, great combo. Trey Turner just got that huge contract, so a really solid group in the middle there. And then the right tackle position, Darrell Williams and Taylor Moton, a second-round pick. We'll see who ends up winning that battle there. So I definitely have my concerns about this tackle position. I think Matt Khalil is going to be another hinge point along there with Russell Shepard. But regardless, some pretty big question marks there, and I think you can kind of see where I'm coming from saying this offense, it's going to be tough for them to win this division and keep up with the big boys in this division. But there is a good chance that they could do that as well. Just because I'm not predicting it to happen, I think I have to prepare for it to happen just because we have seen Cam Newton click with this team, and Vegas likes them as the second best team in this division. So I've got them between 8 to 10 wins. Panthers fans, I'm curious where your expectations are this year. Let me know. That's going to do it, everyone. Cheers and good day. Until next time.